Good afternoon. Welcome to ARTspeak. My name is Arnold Chang, and I'm here to talk about CC Wong. Let me share my screen, and I'll be with you in a second. This is a pre-recorded talk for your KIA ARTbreak. CC Wong was born in Suzhou, China in 1907. The name CC comes from the spelling of Wang Chen, which in the old days was spelled CHI-CH''IEN. Nowadays, using the mainland pinyin system, it's Wang Chen, JIQIAN. Same person, but everybody knew him as CC. I've been asked to talk in conjunction with the program there at the Kalamazoo Institute of an exhibition called CC Wong Lines of Abstraction, which was originally shown at Hunter College Galleries, and I had the pleasure of seeing it there. I'm sorry I can't be with you in Kalamazoo this afternoon. You will also have an opportunity, if you're in town, to attend a curatorial conversation between the two co-curators of the exhibition, Zhou Wenxing and Daniel Greenberg. That is on December 13th, 6 to 7 p.m. And I wish I could be there, and I hope you can attend. There's also, if you're not able to see the show in person, you can have a virtual gallery tour of the exhibition online. It's quite extraordinary. It's as if you're walking through the show, and you can click on each object, and it will show you the label and the information that goes with it. So amazing technology, and hopefully you'll all have a chance to see the exhibition in person, and perhaps get a copy of the catalog as well. So CC Wong, from a very early age, was interested in painting. He told me that his first teacher's name was Fan Haoling, and he began painting landscapes even as a high school student. He also studied with a flower painter named Chen Mo, and more importantly, with a landscape painter named Gulin Shi, who was also a collector of classical Chinese paintings. And this is, I think, the one point that I want to make today. In tomorrow's talk with the two curators, you'll be able to talk specifically about the paintings in the show and how that show was put together. And I think today I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about where CC Wong came from and what his idea about Chinese painting was. So Gulin Shi had inherited a very important collection of paintings, and so for this group of people, scholar artists, they were interested in not just in painting as a creative pursuit, but also as a way of understanding and participating in the tradition of Chinese paintings from the past. So it's very important, I think, collecting, connoisseurship, and creative activity were all part of a kind of a package deal. In addition to Gulin Shi, the most important teacher for CC Wong was a man named Wu Hufan, who had one of the best collections of Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing paintings, that is to say, from the 12th all the way to the 19th century paintings that he was one of the prominent connoisseurs. That is, he understood Chinese painting, and also one of the finest painters himself. So CC Wong, from an early age, started painting, but also started collecting and learning how to authenticate, learning how to appreciate the works of the old masters. And I think this is really the most important thing we have to know, what separates CC Wong from a lot of other 20th century Chinese painters is that his knowledge of the classical work and his activities in connoisseurship and in collecting were as important as his own creative work. Now, I actually met CC Wong because I was studying art history at UC Berkeley with James Cahill, and James Cahill actually introduced me to CC because the Berkeley Art Museum had acquired this painting by CC's master, Wu Fan, and CC Wong was in town in San Francisco, and he came to Berkeley to look at this painting that was donated to the Berkeley Art Museum. Now, as I mentioned, that CC Wong was very involved in connoisseurship. So even before he came to the United States, because he studied with Wu Fan and Gulinsher, people like that, he had access to some of the best collectors in China and some of the great connoisseurs. And at a young age, he was introduced by Wu Fan to the organizers of an exhibition at the Burling House in London at the Royal Academy of Arts that took place in 1935 and 1936. And CC Wong, who was only in his 20s at that time, was selected to be on the committee that made some of the assessments and selections for the works that were going to be shown abroad. And this was the first international exhibition of Chinese art, which included, as you can see, ceramics and lacquers and all other kinds of work and some paintings. So through that introduction, CC had the really unique opportunity to go through the collection of the Palace Museum, which had formerly been the Emperor, the Qing Dynasty Palace, which had been nationalized. And so he was one of the few private individuals to have access to these great early Chinese paintings. And again, he was only in his 20s. He met a German scholar named Victoria Contag, who the two of them produced. She was also involved in the selection committee, and the two of them, after this, produced a very important book, Seals of Chinese Painters and Collectors, because they realized that as they were viewing the Chinese paintings with other scholars, they realized that the connoisseurship was extremely subjective, and there wasn't really an objective way to judge the authenticity. And they thought that one of the important tools would be to have a record, a photographic record of the seals of the painters as well as the collectors that one could actually look at and use in a little bit more objective way by matching up the seals from authentic works. When you came across another painting purported to be by a master, you could check to see if it matched the seals. And this was a radical idea. Of course, the first edition was 1940. And actually, in 1966, they produced an expanded edition that included other collections. To this day, we still use this book, even though it's been supplanted by a more complete seal book. But still, it still has its use even today, and it just demonstrates how CC, even though he had traditional training, he also was forward thinking, and he in fact had received both a Chinese classical education and a more modern Western education when he was a youngster. This is the next opportunity was when CC Wong and James Cahill, my professor, got together in 1959. James Cahill had been selected to write a book on Chinese painting, because Chinese painting studies in the West were really in their infancy at this point. And Professor Cahill had an opportunity to go through the collection of the Imperial Collection, which was now based in Taiwan. And along with CC Wong, they got to look at all the paintings from the Imperial Collection. So by this time, CC this was already his second viewing of the Imperial Collection, when at a time when hardly anybody else had an opportunity. So his understanding of ancient Chinese painting certainly informed his own understanding of quality as well as authenticity, and it influenced the way he himself painted. And this is a copy of the book published by Cahill in 1960, again, a classic of Chinese painting studies. James Cahill actually is the one who introduced me to CC Wong when I was studying with him in Berkeley. Here's a shot of us in San Francisco, and of course we were looking at Chinese paintings, which is basically what all we ever did: talk about paintings, look at paintings, do paintings. I actually was intending to get a PhD in art history studying with James Cahill, but after I met CC Wong, I decided I would go back to New York and learn painting with him for some time, and eventually go back and get my PhD. Well, as fate would have it, I never went back to Berkeley because I kept learning from CC Wong. It was such a great experience. What made his teaching very special is that he allowed us to and encouraged us to copy works from his own collection. So I was able to get as close as a classical Chinese painting education as you could. And remarkably, it was in New York City. Here is a painting that I did, a copy of a Dong Qichang, the famous Dong Qichang painting on the right. My copy's on the left. This painting, after it left his collection, ended up in the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City. So I was very fortunate to be able to have access to the original before it left the collection. Also, I was co-founder of the Chinese painting department at Sotheby's, and CC Wong was a consultant there. So we spent 10, 15 years basically talking about paintings, looking at paintings, and doing paintings together. So I feel really blessed. We even went to Huangshan together, and saw some of this was the only time I was there, the only time he was there. It was a mountain site where many of the famous old masters had also gone. Anyway, we actually even had time to do some painting. Now, there's several books that have been published about CC Wong, and most of them focus on him as a connoisseur and a collector. And in fact, I think that he's so well known as a connoisseur that his painting has sometimes been overlooked. In 1987, Jerome Silbergeld wrote a book that focused more on CC Wong's own paintings, and this is a book that's very useful. But even after 1987, CC Wong continued to do remarkable things. So it's even this book is not complete. There's also a book that was published in China, and the most recent catalog, which goes with the exhibition at Kalamazoo, is CC Wong Lines of Abstraction, and I hope you can all get a copy of that, because it's got essays by a variety of people that really outline CC Wong's entire contribution to the field. Now, just really quickly, I want to show you some of the paintings that were in the CC Wong collection that are now in prominent museums. Several paintings have gone to the Metropolitan Museum. These are all works that CC had previously owned and really formed the basis of the collection at the Met of early Chinese paintings. And I won't go into them one by one, but just to give you an idea of how important excuse me, his role has been in educating the public and the museum curators since he has lived in New York since 1949. Princeton University Art Museum. Wonderful Dong Chang painting, Cleveland Museum of Art. And these are all paintings that you'll see in textbooks. Rear Gallery in Washington, D.C. Asian Art Museum, San Francisco. So CC's influence is tremendous, and there's an essay in the catalog by Joe Schreier-Dolberg, who's a curator at the Metropolitan Museum, that talks about his influence on the study of Chinese paintings. And in many ways, as I mentioned, CC Wong is known more for his work as a connoisseur and a collector, and he didn't like to be called a dealer, but he certainly bought and sold paintings. And in his mind, this is all, it all comes together. He didn't really separate his role as a connoisseur or a collector or a painter, because he bought paintings to learn more about Chinese painting. He did paintings to understand more deeply the techniques that created some of the great masterpieces. Now, quickly, we'll turn to CC Wong's own development, and you can see these are some paintings. The rest of these paintings are going to show all by CC Wong at various times, and there are not too many early works of his around. In the exhibition, there's an interesting hand scroll that has actually 3 different paintings in it, but you can see in his early work, this one from the 1930s, a lot of the early works are not dated, but they're based on the more orthodox school of the Qing dynasty. So it's a really direct transmission from the very tasteful scholarly painting of the late Qing dynasty. And this is, you can see he's in his 20s and 30s. He's learning to paint in a very traditional way. Here's a painting that's in the exhibition, if you get a chance to see it, also not dated, but from the 1940s. And as you'll, if you have the catalog, I think they also mentioned this. This is a painting that is based on it's a style of Wang, a 14th century artist, and you can see the foreground here is taken from this painting. It's not exactly the same, but it's basically copied from this painting, and he's combined it with another painting by the artist Wang. So he's taking the foreground of one painting and the background of another painting and merged them together into a different composition. So this is, you're getting a sense of how one learns to paint in the traditional manner, is you start by copying, but gradually you develop your own individual style. Now, when he moved to America and was here in the early 50s, he found a very different environment. Certainly, there was, he came from the upper kind of elitist, the most in group of Chinese painting specialists in China, and he arrives in New York, and very few people knew about Chinese painting. So he's really had to struggle to find a way to introduce Chinese painting to American audiences. And that's why, partly through education, by working as consultant to private collectors and museums, he tried to educate them about the traditional Chinese standards of brushwork and composition and so forth. But he, as an artist, found that it was very difficult to make a living. He didn't depend on that. But when he first got here, he was working in a store that sold lampshades and lamps, and he actually learned to paint on ceramics, and so more commercial because out of necessity. And he found that his own painting, these bamboo paintings, or even sometimes birds and flowers, were a little bit more easily understood by Western audiences, and landscape seemed to be much more difficult for the audience at the time. So that's another reason why he became more well known, not so much for his own work, but for his understanding of traditional Chinese painting and helping museums and collectors to learn more about classical painting. In the 60s, he starts to he also took art, as you'll see, probably if you come tomorrow night, Wen Xing will talk about his experiences also going to the Art Students League and learning more about Western art at the same time that he's continuing his practice. And he, like many artists of the time, is trying to find a way to modernize Chinese paintings in order to make them more accessible, but also to kind of he realizes that he's in a different time and a different period and a different place, and like other artists of the time, realized that somehow you had to find a way to keep the essential values of traditional Chinese painting, but kind of make it a little bit more accessible and modern. And one of the things he's doing here, he's relying more on ink washes and combining that with his beautiful lines. And this is a painting that's actually was in the collection of James Cahill. And I'm just going to go quickly through one of the great periods of his activity was in the late 60s, early 70s, where he developed a particular new technique. You can see in here where this effect is made by taking a piece of paper, crumbling it up, dipping it into ink, and then imprinting the ink patterns onto another sheet of paper, and then using his brush with wash and with line to kind of find the image within these natural patterns. And this really was something new, and it worked really well for him. So he was able to create these monumental compositions that are partly based on natural textures from this imprinting kind of technique, combined with his own brushwork. And this was really an eye-opener for him, because one of the problems with learning by copying is that you get caught up in a particular mode of compositional structure, and it's quite difficult to break out of that mold. So by forcing yourself to use these new techniques and finding the image within the random patterns, in fact, it's a real way of finding new compositional formats. And I think some of these are really quite extraordinary. So I think what he was also trying to do is, some of these patterns are made just by imprinting onto the paper, but he thought that was very natural. So for him, brushwork is the act of finding natural textures. So he wanted to use his own lines and washes in conjunction with these natural patterns to create overall compositions. In this one, he's using a lot more ink washes to create a kind of, it reminds me of Switzerland, the Alps and so forth. And then unusually he uses white pigment to represent snow. So he's not at all adverse to using new techniques, but he's still trying to preserve a certain aesthetic that he learned from his love of traditional Chinese paintings. This is one of the best works. It's 1974, and actually, even though it looks so new and modern, compositionally it relates to a painting by 17th century artist Bada Shanren, who this big landscape painting was in the collection of CC Wong. And when I see this work on the left, it always reminds me of this 17th century painting that he once owned, just in terms of the compositional format, but the overall image is so much different and so much more modern. He's able to create a sense of monumentality, even though this painting looks like it could be huge. It's probably only about 2 feet wide. But I'd also mention that at the same time he's using these new techniques, he never gives up his use of more fundamental brushwork kind of paintings. So here in 1980, and this is when I came back to New York and was studying it with him. So I came at an interesting time where he'd been through this period of doing very unusual techniques, and then he's kind of returning to the brush, which was very beneficial for me, because I wanted to learn more about the historical Chinese paintings, and so he can still do these are not relying on any texture. It's all done with brush and ink. So he's doing both at the same time. So 1982, this one is a combination, and in the 80s he really masters the technique where he can use all kinds of. He's using opaque pigments here, and he's using the imprinted patterns here, and he's really totally at ease using all different kinds of techniques. Here's one that's all brushwork, but he's combining beautiful line and color with washes, and a very moody kind of painting from 83. I think this is a period where he had going through some health issues, and actually created some very dreamy kind of works. Here again, combination of imprinted pattern and his own brushwork, and he'd liked to think that you couldn't really tell which was drawn and which was printed, and an interesting use of light here. So there are not too many of these paintings in the current exhibition. He's actually, this period is more well documented, and I think the curators for the current show purposely didn't show too many of this type, but there's still really kind of classic CC Wong style. And again, he's also, at the same time that he's doing these that rely more on this texturing, he still is a master of the brush, using more traditional techniques. And this particular work reminds me of another 17th century artist, Shurtao, that another painting that was in the CC Wong collection. So if you know the history, you can see that everything he does has a kind of historical precedent. Now, he also did some much more radical things. This where he's really coming out of the tradition more of calligraphy than of painting. And this looks like Chinese calligraphy, but they're not really characters. So he's moving towards abstraction, but in a way that isn't isn't the same as, I would say, isn't the same as Western abstraction. He's coming at it from the angle of traditional Chinese calligraphy. And I think in the show that's up now, there are more examples of this kind of work. He also occasionally did this kind of still life, which I wish he had done more of. I think they're really, really beautiful. And maybe this is where he learned a little bit from the Art Institute, but using traditional Chinese materials and techniques. And one of my favorite paintings is a small work that is actually a scene from his studio on 69th Street, looking down across the street. But this building here is actually now the site of, it's an old carriage house that houses the Urasenke tea ceremony room is built inside of this. It used to be actually the studio of Mark Rothko. So it's a pretty amazing site, and it's painted here by CC Wong in an almost kind of cubist fashion, very unusual for him. And then these are other works that are more abstract, based on calligraphy, but also combining with other ink and color and just doing enormous things. I wrote a little bit about this. It seems like it could be influenced by graffiti. And one of the students in the new catalog also has written about this. But returning, he died in 2003. And I just wanted to show that even in his late period, he still always never gave up his love of the old masters, and particularly artists like the 14th century painter Ni Zan, of which this is kind of an homage. So even as he was doing all these exciting abstract calligraphic works, he always at the same time returned to these more traditional landscapes, and he never lost sight of his roots. And I think that's a good place to end, with Mr. CC Wong in front of a beautiful painting by the 17th century master Churtal. And I hope you will have an opportunity to see the show if you haven't, and to get a copy of the catalog. Thank you very much.